Hello everyone and welcome back to Tech with NK. In today's video, I'm going to propose a solution to the exercise regular expressions from problem set 7. I'll show you one way to do this. However, I just wish to provide you with a few ideas that you could use when solving the exercise later on by yourself. So that said, let's look at the exercise and see what's expected from us. So in a file called um.py, implement a function called count that expects a line of text as an input as a str and returns as an integer the number of times appears in that text, or if you prefer, case insensitively. So be it uppercase or lowercase as a word unto itself, not as a substring of some other word. For instance, given like hello, world, the function should return 1, but given text like yummy, the function should return 0. And structure um.py as follows: import RE, you could import sys if you want or not. You have a main function, our function count, and at the end of the code, call the function main. And either before or after implementing our function count, additionally we have to implement in the file called test_um.py 3 or more functions that collectively test our implementation of count, each of whose name should begin with test_, so that we can execute the test with Pytest of test_um.py. And we've been given a few hints here. The first one is, in this case, we're going to use the function or the method findAll instead of the method search that we've been using previously. The rest of this is pretty much the same like what we've been saying before, but in this other line, we've been told that the \b is defined as a boundary between \lowercase w and \uppercase w. The \w indicates all alphanumeric characters, that's letters and numbers, and I think they are underscore, but the \uppercase w represents non-alphanumeric characters, that's like punctuation marks and like spaces. So this already tells us that in our pattern we're going to use this \b. And here we've been given a number of links to some websites that you could use to check your regular expressions. You can check out these websites to see how they work. If you want to know more, you could leave a comment in the comment section at the end of the video. And when we look at this demo, in this case the user entered hello, world, and the result was 1. As we can see here, we have as a word of its own and not a substring of another word. When you run the code again, um.py, input hello, world, output 2, and in this case, when the code was run, the input was yum, output 0. Why? Because you have this y here, and so is not a word on its own. And as usual, we're expected to create a directory. We call it seed into that directory, and it's in this directory that we'll create our files um.py and test_um.py. And at the end, run a few tests like usual. Run the code a number of times, making sure that we have the actual count as we expect, and then run test_um.py the first time, making sure that all our tests are correct. Modify our function um.py, run test_um.py once more, ensuring that it's able to catch any errors that resulted from our modifications, correct those modifications, and run test_um.py once more, making sure that everything is correct before submitting our exercise. So with this, I think the exercise is clear enough, and we're just going to go ahead to VS Code and start coding. And this is what our file um.py should look like. But before implementing the function count, I prepared a small Jupyter notebook for us here to help explain a little bit. So in this first code cell, all we need to do is import RE, and I'm going to run that. In this other code cell, I created 3 variables. I saved sample input from the user, and we're going to use these variables or this input to create our pattern and then test that to see the way our pattern works. And I'm going to run these two, and now we're going to write our pattern together. And the first thing you need to recall is that we're supposed to write a pattern that is going to match as a word on its own and not as a substring. And we remember that we were told to use, or rather we were hinted that we could use \b, that's a special character that is used to separate words or alphanumeric characters and non-alphanumeric characters. And so what does that look like? If I come in this pattern here and I put a \b here, I put and another \b. So this means that our pattern is expecting a non-alphanumeric character, the actual characters u and m, and then another non-alphanumeric character. And let's take a look with this first example. This is good. We have a non-alphanumeric character here, which is a space, the actual characters u and m, and another non-alphanumeric character, that's a comma, before we have good. So here is a word on its own. In this other example, we have comma, this is yummy. We have 1, 2, but then in this other case, we have an alphanumeric character or y before we have and after that we still have another character. So in this case, yummy is not valid, and we're only going to match this and this other And here as well, we have an h here which is alphanumeric, and so these two will not count, and so here we have a 0. So I'm going to save this pattern and let's run this other code cell. We're running arrow_a.findAll pattern with input 1, and we're setting the flag arrow_a.ignore case, because remember we're told that the user's input should be considered case insensitive. So if I run this, as we can see, we have one match, which is this right here. Let me change this and instead do input 2 and run this again. We have two matches, this and this and as we expected, we're ignoring the case of the and this time around, let me run this again with input 3, shift enter, and we have 0 matches. And now we are sure that our pattern is working just fine. So I'm going to come back to this file um.py, and we're going to implement the function count. The first thing is I'm going to remove all of this, or create a variable, or call this variable pattern. And as we already know what the pattern will look like, yes, a \b, a \b, and that's it for our pattern. Next, I'll create the other variable match, and we're running arrow_a.findAll of pattern, comma, the input from the user, which is saved in the parameter s, and arrow_a.ignore case. And this should find every in the user's input. And as we saw earlier, match here is a list which contains a number of found in the user's input. And so if we want a count of that, all we need to do is to return the length of that input, or rather the length of that list, and this should do for our function count. So I'm going to save this, and let's test this together before going to implement our function test_um. So here I'm going to run python of um.py, and we've been prompted to enter input. Let's say returns 1, and as we expected, the output is 1. Let me run this again, and let's say I don't have anything, and 0. So this tells us that our function count works just fine. So I'm going to save this, and I'm going to implement the function test_um.py. But let me close this terminal first. And as we all know, the first thing we need to do in this function is to import count from Now that that's done, what we need to do next is to implement a number of functions to test our implementation of count. I'm going to propose this first function, or call it test_empty. So as you can already guess, yes, I'm going to assert that count of an empty string, let me correct this here, there's supposed to be a t here, will equal to a 0. So count of an empty string should return 0. Next, let me create another function. I'm going to call this test_substring, and in this function, let me correct this, there's not supposed to be an e here, and in this function I want to assert that count of, let's say yes, with HUMM will result to a 0 as well. And with this done, let me create other functions that are going to test sentences that actually have present. In this other function, I'm going to test for in a lowercase. So I'll call this function test underscore in lowercase. And in this function, I want to assert that count of, let's say is yummy. What does that even mean? I don't really know, but well, that's fine. And this should return 1 because we only have one here that's a single word. These and these are wrong. And I'm going to create one more function to check for as an uppercase word. So uppercase with no parameters. And in this function, I want to assert that count of what, let's say uppercase is once more, correct? And this should return 2. So I'm going to save this or open up my terminal, and we're going to run pytest of test underscore um.py. When I press enter, we have 4 tests passed. And with this, we are sure that our function count is working correctly. Now let me come back here and modify this file um.py. We're going to introduce a little bug and see the way our tests are going to behave. So here, let me remove this second \b here. When I save this file and I run pytest one more time, I press enter, and we still have 4 tests passed. I think this just means that we've not written enough tests. Well, let me remove this other \b here and see what happens. Let me save this, or save this file um.py, and I'm going to save this other test again. And finally, we have 3 failed and 1 pass. The functions that failed are test underscore substring, test underscore lowercase and test underscore uppercase And we do not even need to look at Pytest to figure out what happened, because if we just come back here to test underscore since we removed the \b at the beginning and at the end of well, this should just match any that's found in the user's input. And here we have and a lot more here. So in this case, Pytest is expecting a 0, but the result from assert count here is 1. Here it should be expecting 1, but this will result to 3. And here as well, there's another error. But the fix for this is very easy. All we need to do is to introduce our \b's once more at the beginning and at the end of So if I save this and I run pytest one more time, let's say pytest test underscore um.py, and we have passed all our 4 tests again. So that's it for this exercise. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments section below. But I want to believe this one was easy enough. If you enjoyed the video, do well to hit the like and subscribe buttons, and I look forward to seeing you in my upcoming videos. That said, have a good day.